Howdy, howdy, howdy. My name is Nacha Sasuke. Welcome back to Let's Read the Warhammer 40K Wiki. I meant to do this yesterday, but I existential crisis, I guess, and didn't end up doing much of anything. So, when we last left off on Terra, we were at defenses, and I'm get out of here. Looking to finish the Terra page today, and then I'll check the timeline to see what I'm going to be doing next. So, as the throne world of the Imperium, Terra is the most heavily defended world in the galaxy, as Terra itself had faced a few true threats in the 10,000 years since the end of the Horus Heresy. Even the idea of attacking the planet has been seen as ridiculous by many Imperial officials throughout history. However, the world has always been protected by a multitude of layered defenses drawn from every branch of the Imperial military. These include, but are not limited to, the following. The Battle Fleet Solar, where'd that go? Okay. The Battle Fleet Solar. The Battle Fleet Solar of the Imperial Navy includes not only the largest number of capital ships the Imperium possesses in one fleet, but a vast array of star forts of many different types. The Phalanx is the mobile fortress monastery of the Imperial Fist chapter. It normally takes up station in high orbit over Terra. My friend, when I told him that I kept reading about the Imperial Fist but knew nothing about them, what he told me is that they wear yellow and black, and he said that they're basically what Rogel Dorn was wearing in the Emperor Text-to-Speech series, which led me to decide that they are the Imperial Bumblebees. So, the Astra Militarum is multiple Imperial Guard regiment garrisons Terra, including the Palatine Sentinels, the Lucifer Blacks, the Katanda Stalwarts, and Terran Prefects. The Convent Prioress of the Adeptus Sororitas, which it just says nothing about, I guess. Adeptus Custodes, the Sisters of Silence. Since the resurrection of Guilliman and his return to the position of Lord Commander of the Imperium, he has sought to restore the Sisters of Silence to their ancient place of prominence as defenders of the Throne World. The Legio Ignatum Titan Legion. Knights of House Tyrannus. The Imperial Knights of House Tyrannus of Mars are always available to lend their aid to the defense of Terra. Ordo Sinister. Adeptus it's either Arbites or Arbites. It's probably the one that sounds fancier. Ordo Custodum of the Inquisition. The Ordo Custodum is a minor order of the Inquisition. Founded in the 35th millennium, it currently consists of under 50 Inquisitors that keep a vigilant watch on Terra. The Order Hereticus also maintains a large presence on the planet. The Inquisitorial Stormtroopers. Officio Assassinorum, a small detachment of Space Wolves. Why is it bolded like that? The Imperial Fist Chapter. The Imperial Fist garrisoned on Terra as a full until the War of the Beasts in the mid-32nd millennium, when they moved off-world to become a fleet-based chapter. But elements of the chapter returned to defend the planet on a semi-permanent basis in the aftermath of the 13th Black Crusade in 999, or I guess 41999. Crusader Host, the 30th to the 31st millennium. The Crusader Host was a group of Space Marines drawn from all 18 Space Marine legions based within the Sol system during the Great Crusade. Their exact purpose is unknown. When news of the Horus Heresy reached Terra, Rogel Dorn had all members of the host imprisoned in Kangba Marwu, fearing for their loyalty, save for the Imperial Fist members. Sometime later, several of these Astartes chose to escape. This small group became known as the Outcast Dead, and the Fraterus Templar, 32nd to 36th millennia. It was the military order of the Adeptus Ministorum until it was disbanded and replaced by the Orders Militant of the Adeptus Sororitas in the 36th millennium after the Age of Apostasy. In the centuries between the 32nd and 36th millennia, when the political power of the ecclesiarchy was at its height and largely ruled the Imperium, the Fraterus Templar provided a significant force to defend the sacred throne world from humanity's enemies, almost entities. Okay, the Golden Throne. Terra is the resting place of the immortal Emperor of Mankind, where he has sat on the life-preserving cybernetic Golden Throne, neither alive nor truly dead, for 10,000 years. He and the Imperial Palace are guarded by the elite Adeptus Custodes. Among them is a select inner core of 300 who never leave his side, known as the Companions. Was he immortal before or after they put his bones on the throne that keeps him alive forever with the life forces of Psychers. Because if he wasn't immortal until after they put him on the throne, then I feel like that's not really immortality, but... The Astronomicon is a psychic navigational beacon located on Terra, and is a vital navigation aid to the mutant navigators of the Navis Nobilite, who pilot the Imperium's commercial and military starships through the chaotic eddies of the warp. Without its telepathic guidance, faster-than-light travel through the warp at distances of more than a few light years at a time would be next to impossible, and the Imperium of Man would collapse economically, militarily, and politically. Luna, the moon, has been colonized and is home to immense planetary defense lasers charged with protecting Terra from invasion. These defenses inflicted savage losses on the invading Traitor Legion fleets of the War Master Horus during the latter stages of the Horus Heresy. Luna served as the greatest shipyard and naval base in the Imperium of Man at the time of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. Luna also gives its name to a common class of Imperial Navy cruiser, the Luna class. And the pilgrimage now. Okay, so it looks like we're basically at the end of the part of the page that matters. The pilgrimage, billions of Imperial cult pilgrims. So I was almost done. The reason I stopped the way I did last time is because Bandicam, which I recorded with, does this thing where when you record after an hour, it'll just slice up the files, and I never know when it's going to do it. If I had known I only had like 7 minutes left, I'd have kept going. But all the superfluous nonsense at the bottom of the page made me think I had more to go than I did. So anyway, billions of Imperial cult pilgrims flock to the planet every day, eager for a glimpse of the Imperial Palace or one of the untold number of gargantuan Imperial cathedrals of the Ecclesiarchy. In spite of the fact that millions of pilgrims are accepted daily, many more are kept waiting. Such is the scale of the Imperium of Man in the 41st millennium, that many of these pilgrims' journeys were started by their ancestors, and only centuries later would a member of the family actually complete their long pilgrimage to Terra. Many will set out hopeful and never come close to their goal. Those who make it are said to never return, crushed to death by their fellow pilgrims, executed by the Adeptus Arbites, or whatever, for straying into restricted areas, or perhaps killed by the crazed and destitute Hive City citizens of violent gangers, etc. And then there's trivia. The name Terra originates from the ancient Terran language known as Latin, which translates as earth/land. It is the name of Earth in many modern-day Romance languages descended from Latin. And then there's a couple of videos, which is Grimdark Lore Part 3 and Part 4, which I'm inclined to think is a Luton video, because this seems to be how he titles his videos. So now that I have determined that the rest of the page was actually not that much, and I was basically lied to by the setup of the Fandom website, let's head on over to the timeline and see what comes next. We read about the Necrontyr and all that jazz. Skibbity bop. Tide turns, enslavers. Rise of humanity, so Age of Terra, Age of Technology, Age of Strife, Fall of the Aeldari. Should I read about all these things? Because reading about Terra didn't really explain any of this. It's just like, here's the planet and some stuff that happened on the planet, vaguely. So I guess I should check out the Rise of Humanity and just click off of that there, Terra. Why does making the page bigger make such a difference? Okay, so the Rise of Humanity, Age of Terra, and the Stellar Exodus. For millions of standard years after the Necrons and their captive Citan shards went into hibernation on their tomb worlds, the devastated sentient populations of the galaxy slowly recovered from their red harvests. In time, the Aeldari, doesn't really say how to pronounce it, emerged as the most dominant civilization in the galaxy, with the core of their star-spanning empire located in the region of the galaxy that would later become the Eye of Terror Warp Rift. The Eye of Terror Warp Rift. Capitalizing warp but not rift makes that a weird statement. But on the planet called Earth and later Terra by its inhabitants, an intelligent mammalian humanoid species known as humanity was rising to prominence over 40,000 standard years ago. During the Age of Terra, or the Age of Progress, it is sometimes called by imperial historians, the human race advanced beyond its ancient pre-industrial past to obtain spacefaring capability and began to slowly settle the terraformable worlds in its own solar system and in the star systems near its homeworld using massive sublight starships. The stellar exodus, which occurred during the Age of Terra, is a poorly understood period of human history, which is generally accepted to cover the majority of mankind's initial forays into interstellar space and the genesis of most of the oldest human extrasolar colonies, beginning at some unknown point in the mid to late 3rd millennium. This period is generally understood to lead into the so-called Dark Age of Technology, sometime around the 15th millennium AD during much of the stellar exodus. Humanity lacked any knowledge of the existence of the Immaterium or warp drive, and so was forced to travel between the stars in great sublight generation ships or using cryogenic hibernation. The Age of Technology. Much of the era of human history known to imperial historians as the Age of Technology, or the Dark Age of Technology, that lasted between approximately the 15th to 25th millennium AD, is mysterious. It was in this time that the psychic mutants called navigators were first born or created, and combined with the invention of the warp drive, allowed humanity to travel between worlds faster than the speed of light, by using the dangerous hyperdimensional psychically reactive medium of the Immaterium or warp. Long before the rise of the Emperor and the birth of the Imperium, during the Age of Technology, humanity reached out to the stars, eager to occupy new worlds and expand its burgeoning interstellar empire. Vast colonization warships carried eager human settlers along with all the resources they might require and landed on far-flung, often isolated worlds. The first night worlds were founded at the very start of the Age of Technology before the discovery of the warp drive in the 18th millennium. When scouts from Terra traveled far through the galaxy seeking planets to use as agricultural worlds to provide food for mankind's burgeoning population, or as mining colonies to provide the materials needed to fuel their expansion across the stars. Indeed, the so-called night worlds had already been established for thousands of standard years when the Imperium first founded in the 30th millennium. When those first human scout ships discovered a suitable planet for colonization, gigantic sublight spacecraft were dispatched to settle them. These ships were part of Terra's Long March fleets, named after the duration of their voyage and their destination among the stars. The name was apt. Each of the Long March colony starships carried thousands of settlers on a solar, decades-long journey to a far distant planet. Upon arrival, the colony ship would land and be immediately cannibalized by the colonists to provide raw materials needed for their first settlements. There was no hope of return to mankind's distant homeworld. The struggle for survival on many of these worlds was grim. On some, the settlers found themselves the prey of vicious predators or were attacked by native alien races, which saw the human settlers as invaders. On other worlds, extreme weather conditions or an unbreathable atmosphere made travel outside of domed habitat zones next to impossible. However, problems like these had been anticipated, and in order to deal with them, the settlers were supplied with standard template construct databases and fabrication facilities that allowed them to build powered suits of exo-armor. Okay. The pilots of these bipedal walking machines were protected by a hard shell of plasteel and armed with an array of military-grade heavy weapons. The suits proved invaluable. Few, if any, natural predators or hostile alien warriors could stand against them, and they could travel through even the most dangerous environments with ease. The towering armored figures soon became a common sight on the colonies, where they were known as Knights by the settlers, after the legendary armored warriors and protectors of ancient Terran history. An Imperial Knight Paladin of House Terran. Compelled by the mind-altering effects instilled by the Throne's Mechanicum, a mind impulse control platform that allows a pilot to mentally interface with their knight battlesuit. Over the course of a few generations, these elite warriors gradually developed a society that evolved into the knightly houses. The plasteel plates of the original exoskeleton suits were slowly replaced with more ornate armor made from adamantium, providing better protection as well as a panoply befitting the wearer's prestige and rank in their society. The more mundane duties that the knights had once taken part in on the colony worlds, logging with their mighty Reaper chainswords, for example, or blasting apart rock or with their rapid-fire battle cannons, were delegated to those of lesser ranks, allowing the knights to focus on the arts of war and governorship. Dwelling in tall strongholds, these nobles strove to protect the lives of their subjects as they now saw their settlers they protected, and to bring order to the primeval maelstrom on the planets that were their homes. The knightly houses proved to be highly successful at both of these things, and soon became a vital part of human society during the Age of Technology. The existence of rapid interstellar travel, eventually provided by the warp drive, allowed human colony worlds to interact on a normal timescale for the first time, and interstellar commerce and communication became impossible, allowing like-minded human worlds to join into political and economical combines for their mutual benefit. Eventually, at some point during this era, all of humanity was united beneath some form of interstellar government. What is also known, largely from the works of Keeper Crepius, is that a group known as the Men of Gold relied on the works of the Men of Stone in order to create a fantastically prosperous interstellar society, but one devoid of spirituality or piety, by later imperial standards, focused instead only upon the advancement of science and technology. The Stone Men are known to have created a third group, the Men of Iron, postulated to be some form of artificially self-aware robots or thinking machines, in order to assist them in their labors and carry out military duties. The Men of Iron became uncontrolled and rebelled against their human creators, and a cataclysmic conflict broke out, resulting in a partial Malthusian catastrophe across much of the human-settled galaxy, in which there were no longer enough resources to support the vast populations of mankind. From this time onwards, it became an article of faith in human societies that the creation of thinking machines should be forbidden. Since there's not a link for the word Malthusian, I'm going to have to assume that's a real word, and so I'm going to look up on my tiny technology what that is. It led me to Thomas Robert Malthus, FRS, who is an English economist. So, what does being Malthusian mean? Let's see. It's the theory that population tends to increase at a faster rate than its means of subsistence, and that unless it is checked by moral restraint or disaster, widespread poverty and degradation inevitably result. So it sounds like the Men of Iron made disaster happen. So this is resulting in a partial disaster catastrophe. Okie dokie. Even worse, following the destruction caused by the war against the Men of Iron, human psykers began to appear in large numbers across many human colony worlds, one of the harbingers of the final decline of the Aeldari Empire, which controlled even more of the galaxy than mankind did in these years. The result was humanity's first introduction to the demonic entities that dwelt within the warp and the ultimate collapse of human interstellar civilization during what became known as the Age of Strife. On Terra, this period would be remembered by a different name, Old Night. Does those go to different things if they're the same thing? Okay, so here's a summary of the Age of Strife. During the Age of Technology, humanity had reached its scientific and technological peak. The Standard Template Construct, or STC, a computer database of schematics for all known advanced human technologies, had been perfected by human scientists and engineers, and allowed an unprecedented expansion of humanity throughout the galaxy. One of the reasons humanity was so successful at conquering a large part of the galaxy was the development of the artificially intelligent constructs now only known in the Imperial legend as the Men of Iron. These powerful and fully intelligent combat robots won many wars for humanity, but for some reason turned against their masters at the end of the Dark Age of Technology. The war was eventually won by humanity, but at a great cost. The damage was catastrophic and had shattered much of humanity's power. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning of mankind's misfortunes. As humanity became widely dispersed across the galaxy during the Age of Technology, the ancient Aeldari Empire began its decline. The great success of the advanced Aeldari species had led to decadence and hedonism on a grand scale. Within the immaterial psychic universe of the warp, The spiritual corruption of the Aeldari civilization was reflected in the forming of a new potent psychic gestalt or entity or chaos god, Slaanesh, which in turn caused massive disturbances in the warp. Parts of the galaxy became isolated by these warp storms, making warp travel and astro-telepathic interstellar communication increasingly impossible as the years passed, cutting off many human colony worlds from one another, including those of the Sol system. Towards the end of the Age of Humanity, technology, Psykers first appeared among humanity. While persecuted on many backwards, regressive human worlds as witches, in enlightened and progressive societies, these Psykers were at first protected and accepted. The initial intolerance for Psykers would later seem prescient, as many human worlds fell to the dominance of demons and other warp creatures, using possessed weak-willed Psykers as gateways into the physical world. Only worlds which had rigorously suppressed Psykers survived the Age of Strife. The Age of Strife followed the Age of Technology as the interstellar human civilization collapsed in widespread insanity, demonic possession, anarchy, and interhuman civil war. Terrible weapons of the Golden Age of Technology were unleashed, devastating many human colonies and turning once verdant worlds such as Baal Secundus into irradiated desert planets. Well, you named it after a demon, that's your fault. Many isolated and vulnerable human colonized worlds also became prey to hostile alien species such as the orcs. In a relatively short span of time, the once galaxy-spanning human civilization was brought to its knees, and was forced to endure nearly 5 Terran millennia of anarchy, terror, war, genocide, and slavery. Other than tales of great suffering, little information concerning these long years survived this dark time to be known to men and women as the Imperium. How long is the fall of the Aeldari? Okay. It does definitely sound like the fall of the Aeldari needs to be read about. So let's do that. Because if whatever it is they did hit humanity as hard as it did, I think that probably counts as Terra stuff. Technically. Before the fall of their potent interstellar empire, the Aeldari were a technologically and psychically advanced humanoid species, generally considered the most powerful intelligent race in the entire galaxy. The technology had advanced so far that little or no labor was required by individual Aeldari to provide the daily necessities of life. As a result of the sheer boredom and ennui that resulted, at some point during the 25th millennium AD by the Terran calendar, groups of Aeldari began forming what were known as pleasure cults, dedicated to the pursuit of every pleasure and sensation that life had to offer their kind. Despite the prediction of the reclusive Aeldari seers that warned of impending doom if the Aeldari did not change their hedonistic ways, government within the Aeldari Empire soon collapsed and the moral degeneration of their homeworlds and various colony worlds continued unimpeded. As the pursuit of ever more extreme experiences reached its height, death reigned in the streets of Aeldari cities, hunter and hunted, each being part of a twisted ritual of destruction that consumed millions in orgies of savage bloodlust and excess. Some Aeldari were able to see that their now corrupt society was destroying itself and fled in disgust. These refugees would settle in the distant rural colonies of their empire and would later be known as the Exodites, or take to their massive world-sized Aeldari craft worlds and sail amidst the stars as merchants and explorers, far from the scenes of hedonistic excess that were destroying the heart of the Aeldari Empire in the galactic northwest. I read that wrong. Upon death, the souls of all deceased sentient beings traverse the bounds of the physical realm and go to rest within the hyperdimensional realm of psychically reactive energy that undergirds all of reality, known as the Immaterium or Warp. As more and more corrupt Aeldari died, their souls began to coalesce into a larger entity within the Warp, a living representation of the hedonistic corruption that had defined their lives. This growing presence in the Warp caused massive warp storms to aggregate across the galaxy, eventually making interstellar travel and communications impossible for the colonies of humanity, bringing on mankind's Age of Strife. This just-alt collection of corrupt Aeldari souls gained sentience sometime in the late 30th millennium, creating the powerful new warp entity known as the Chaos God Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, called She Who Thirsts by the Aeldari. When Slaanesh came to be, an ethereal explosion occurred that spanned the extent of warp space within the Milky Way galaxy, with the epicenter being located within the Aeldari core homeworlds. As Aeldari caught in the immense psychic blast were instantly killed, their souls consumed by Slaanesh, and the surrounding region of space was transformed into a massive permanent warp rift, later known as the Eye of Terror to humanity. The core Aeldari homeworlds were transformed into the ruined hellscapes today known as the Crone Worlds. Most of the remaining Aeldari gods, who themselves existed as entities within the warp, were destroyed by Slaanesh after its cataclysmic birth. Let's see. Kala Mensha Kane, the Aeldari god of war, attempted to combat the new Chaos God, but Kane's form was shattered and exiled to the mortal realm, where it came to rest in the infinity circuits of the Asuryani craft worlds, but could be embodied in the form of animated constructs called avatars, which rested in the hearts of the various craft worlds during times of grave peril. The only other Aeldari gods to survive the fall were the trickster god Kegorak, also called the Laughing God, who hid himself within the Webway, and Isha, who was ripped from the jaws of Slaanesh by the Chaos God Nurgle, who now keeps her as a slave within its hideous garden home within the realm of chaos. The fall utterly destroyed the once vast interstellar Aeldari Empire, leaving scattered bands of Aeldari fighting for survival. Before the fall, vast spacecraft called craft worlds were constructed, enabling those wishing to escape the degeneration of the Aeldari homeworld to flee, along with samples of their lost world's flora and fauna. When the fall occurred, the various craft worlds rode out the ethereal shockwave in the warp, some being destroyed in the process. The Exodite worlds, far from the epicenter of the terrible catastrophe, were largely untouched by the birth scream of Slaanesh. In order to prevent the events of the fall from ever occurring, the Aeldari of the craft worlds, who now call themselves the Asuryani, but were long known as the Eldar to outsiders, devised the Asuryani path system, by which every craft world Aeldari would follow a strict, almost fanatical life path pursuing a specific activity, such as crafting or war, for a portion of their long lifespans, before switching to another path when the previous one grew stale. In this way, the Asuryani hoped to control the extreme emotional and psychic sensitivity that had left them open to corruption by chaos in the first place. However, some corrupted Aeldari did survive the birth of Slaanesh by taking refuge within the Webway itself, which had long been home to a nearly infinite cavalcade of hyperdimensional subrealms that were protected from Slaanesh predations by the psychic wards erected within the labyrinth dimension to keep the dangers of the warp at bay. These sadistic beings became known as the Drukhari, or Dark Eldar to outsiders, the inhabitants of the vast dark city within the Webway called Kamorog. Kamorog? The Drukhari later preyed on humans and Asuryani alike to find souls whose torment and anguish they could psychically devour to keep their own tainted souls from being consumed by Slaanesh. Which somehow leads directly into the Great Crusade? How long is that? And then the Horus Heresy. I feel like the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy should maybe be their own things. But I'm not sure if I want them to be the next things, because the way this is broken up, there's hyperlinks everywhere. So I'm not sure if I should be reading the Great Crusade first or the Emperor of Mankind first. If I should take a closer look at the Age of Strife since it gets multiple links, figure out why it's called the Old Knight by some people and why that seems to be its own page. I also kind of just want to read about the Chaos Gods before I move on. I'm not sure if I should be reading about the Chaos Gods before I move on, but I'm very curious to understand what exactly these things are. Because I don't really have a whole lot of context for what the Chaos Gods are. Other than playing the first couple of chapters of one of the Warhammer games that seems to be related to Nurgle. The one with the Imperium. Martyrdom something? I forget the name off the top of my head. But anyway, I feel like if I'm going to be reading about the Great Crusade and then the Horus Heresy on the timeline page, I should also look at them on their main pages instead, which would need their own videos. Because I'm considering this all to be part 2 of the history of Terra. Since I didn't know I only had a couple minutes left because of the way the website worked. So despite this being much shorter than the last 2 videos, I'm going to call it here. And the next one is either going to be the Great Crusade or reading about the Chaos Gods. I'll figure it out when I figure it out. If you like this video, a like and a subscribe would be groovy. If you didn't, you'll need to do either one of those things. If you want to click the bell, you can do that as well so that you're notified of future uploads. And I will see y'all in the next one. Later.